Imagine living your life after 50 and feeling energized and excited about your future. Welcome to the Women in the Middle podcast, the podcast for women who are ready to figure out what they want and create the life they deserve. Here's your host and master certified life coach, Susie Rosenstein.
Hey there, today we're talking about a sneak attack on Autopilot and my art journal epiphany. Let's go. Welcome back to the podcast Women in the Middle with over 2 million downloads and counting. I am so grateful that the podcast world has brought us together like this, so thank you so much for tuning into the show. Now, Women in the Middle is all about getting unstuck, clear, and excited about leading your next chapter, especially if you're in your 50s and 60s and starting to feel just how precious time really is. I am your host, Susie Rosenstein, your Master Certified Coach, Midlife Leadership Mentor, and Certified Zentangle Teacher. And today we have a really great topic. As you probably saw, today's episode is number 449, and the topic was not one that was planned far in advance. Part of my process for coming up with topics is noticing what's coming up a lot lately, especially in my business. And over the last few months, I've noticed that I've shared my personal story about my art journal epiphany many more times than usual, including the first time I realized the impact it had on me over the years. I finally realized that the insights were podcast worthy. So here we are today, and I know you're going to relate. And you don't have to be an artist or even use an art journal to understand what we're talking about. But first, just quick, I wanted to tell you about a new call that I'm offering. It's called the Autopilot Audit, and it is perfect for you if you've noticed that you're starting to feel differently. You got the memo, time is flying by. You probably say it all the time like I do. But even though you're capable, responsible, and productive, your days may start feeling repetitive, kind of predictable, not all the things, but some of the things. And quite frankly, a little too same old for your liking. And it's not just that. You also might be noticing that some of your decisions, your routines, and life direction, they just don't make sense like they used to. And this is usually something related to not being as happy as you know you want to be. And it's a big time waster, that is for sure. So the Autopilot Audit will help you get clear insight into what's actually happening, a sharper understanding of what you want going forward, and a grounded recommendation for your next step. It's like a structured mirror on your life for what is really going on. I am super committed to this because time really does matter now more than ever. And my friend, sleepwalking through the privilege of aging, it's not your style. So if you're ready to identify where you may be running on default instead of decision, book your Autopilot Audit at www.talktosusie.com. Okay, now let's dive in. If you had told me years ago that an art journal would become one of the most powerful tools in midlife, I would have totally rolled my eyes. Honestly, I thought art journaling was ridiculous. To me, it seemed like a waste of time, a waste of paper and resources, a waste of perfectly good productivity. Because if I wasn't going to do something with it, what was the point? Is just going to sit there in a journal? That's what I was thinking. And that kind of thinking was the problem. So today I want to tell you how doodling and this art journal, yes, this is all true, how it became a sneak attack on my autopilot lifestyle and helped me practice something I didn't even realize was missing. And that was presence. So first, let's talk a little bit about midlife productivity. For most of my life, I valued being productive. I hear this all the time from the midlife gals, like you. Efficient, capable, responsible, moving things forward, making a list, checking things off, and if something didn't produce a result, it felt indulgent. Now the result, of course, a result deemed to be so by other people. I remember back in 2013, and I just looked up the date to be sure, Oprah did a 6-week life class with Brene Brown on the gifts of imperfection. Maybe you also participated. A requirement of the course was to have an art journal. So I had to buy one, and it was my first one. I remember I noticed that I was a little uncomfortable even with the purchase because I had some negative thoughts about it. Like it was a waste of money because we wouldn't likely be using the whole journal, and what were we going to be doing anyway that it needed a special journal? Then, as the course progressed, I started to enjoy it a little bit, but I remembered thinking, why are we spending all this time creating something in the art journal that would just end up tucked away somewhere? So, I'm not saying that valuing productivity and producing at a high quality is never a good idea. For example, that kind of mindset works beautifully when you're building a career, raising a family, running a business, but in midlife, it can quietly turn into something else. You're still doing, you're still achieving, you're still handling everything, but you're not necessarily present. You're effective, but are you experiencing your life if you're only focusing on crossing the finish line fast or checking things off the box, like going through that whole list, with something that's only valuable when it's complete, perfect, or finished, or has an expressed purpose? So really think about that. Is that the only thing that's valuable, getting all that stuff done at a high level, if it has a purpose that you think is worthy? So midlife moves fast, and if we're not present for it, it disappears. You might know the expression, quote, "lost time is never found again," end quote, famously stated by Benjamin Franklin. Lost time is never found again. Time is irreversible. You just can't get it back. The present moment is invaluable, but do you treat it this way? Do you think about it this way? So fast forward a few years past the Oprah Brene Brown course, which was really good, by the way, despite my negative attitude about the journal. Clearly, when I first started using an art journal, I didn't respect it. I didn't understand it. I just okay, I was like, I want to take this course, so I'll just go to Michael's and get an art journal. But, I kept thinking, what is this for? What will I do with this? How does this help? I really wasn't sure. And then in 2021, I was in a membership about using simple doodle drawings and markers, and again, it required an art journal. This time, it was more about drawing specific things, and it made a little more sense, but not that much to me anyway. I still didn't see the big picture, and I was still focused on not wasting time, resources, or valuable journal pages on work that was in progress, not finished. But then I got into Zentangle and even became a certified Zentangle teacher. Zentangle is classically taught on small squares of beautiful paper tiles with a fine tip marker and a pencil, and I loved it. Eventually, I tried experimenting with watercolor and Zentangle, and that's when I remembered this thing called an art journal. But something unexpected happened too. At the beginning, when I sat down to doodle in an art journal, I still noticed my urge to rush. I still noticed my urge to check my phone. I still noticed the voice that wanted it to be good, like really good, and something else. This kind of thinking became less and less. That was new. That was really new. The art journal somehow gave me permission to slow down and be present. The only thing I can think of that changed, other than my thoughts, obviously, was visually seeing a journal of paper, like a stack of paper. No pressure, no scarcity, and change from working on one piece of paper or canvas or wood was enough of a change that I thought about it differently. An art journal is a journal full of paper, not just one sheet or one other thing that you're working on. Now, it got me out of autopilot, just rush and get this done kind of thinking, which seemed so strange because I loved what I was doing. I bet you can totally relate to this. You love what you're doing. Why are you rushing through it? Now, with every art journal, and I have a stack, I noticed my thinking changing more and more. It wasn't all about producing or finishing. It wasn't all about being perfect, although I could see that I was calmly improving slowly, but still working on it. It wasn't all about getting there. There was no longer better than here. So I felt more settled in the doing rather than only the completing. I was noticing. I was calmer. I was more present. This was present moment functioning. I've talked about this concept on several episodes, so I will highlight them in the show notes if you're interested in learning more. I was fully conscious and engaged in the here and now. So there was some kind of a sneak attack happening when it came to the autopilot way I was approaching this activity of sitting down to do something I enjoyed. I'm calling it the sneak attack on autopilot, and here's why this is a big deal. If I had sat myself down and said, Susie, let's examine your productivity identity and subconscious worth patterns. How about that? Sound fun? That answer would have been no. I would have resisted, and I bet you would too. But doodling using pens and watercolor, I was even having fun with a Sharpie marker in a Spyro-bound art journal. Really? This felt harmless. It felt gentle. It felt silly and fun. There was lightness. It felt a little bit playful to be creating in this abundant way. The paper in the journal absolutely felt abundant. And that's why I think it worked. It bypassed the part of me that needed everything to be useful and perfect. And in that softened kind of state, I could see my mind. I could hear myself think. I was on to my shenanigans. I was content to just notice it at first, just see it, and I could feel the urge to rush, and I could manage it. And here's what I realized. You cannot think on purpose if you never notice what your brain is doing. Now, I'm going to repeat that because it's so important. You cannot think on purpose if you never notice what your brain is doing. Doodling became kind of a noticing lab, I think. It was a way to practice staying instead of reacting to my urge to go faster and finish it. A way to experience time instead of focusing on the goal of completing. It's a big deal. It really is. It's so hard to slow down. So we're talking about an art journal epiphany with doodling, but there's so much more going on here that's applicable to many parts of your life. Here's why I think this matters, especially after 50. So at our age, something shifts. And I'm not just talking about your new attention to chin hairs, although that's very important. So are those 10-time magnification mirrors. Anyway, it's bigger than that. You realize that time isn't endless. And that realization can either create anxiety or reverence. So think about it. Presence is how we experience time. Without presence, years blur. Just imagine what is happening with our addiction to our phones. Without presence, years blur. Days stack up, moments vanish. You might even notice yourself saying, oh my gosh, I can't even remember anything anymore. I got to write that down. But somehow, when you sit with a pen and paper drawing simple, repetitive, structured patterns, something slows. Your nervous system settles. Your thoughts become almost visible. Your urges become obvious. You create space to think, and you have a choice. Not about your whole life necessarily, but just about this moment, this little moment in time. And that, my friend, that is powerful. It can become a skill that you can access in so many parts of your life. And this is really why I finally created the Midlife Doodle Think Club. I have been thinking about it for years, and I even took the domain out, doodlethink.com, a while ago, like years ago. Not as an art class, not as coaching, and definitely not as another thing to achieve, but rather as a mindfulness practice space, a place where midlife women who are very good at doing get to practice noticing. You're going to notice your impatience, your perfectionism, your restlessness, your urge to multitask, your drive to finish the thing. And instead of caving into those urges, you get better and better at staying present. That's it. It's simple, it's playful, it's surprisingly profound. And yes, it's a bit of a sneak attack on autopilot because you can't lead your life on purpose if you never notice what's running it. And I have a feeling that you don't want your autopilot mindset and behavior to be calling the shots going into your next chapter. That's for sure. Don't get me wrong, you're definitely going to learn some awesome techniques about what mindful doodling and the Zentangle method have to offer. But like I said, that's not all this is about. That's why it's called Doodle Think, not just doodle. But here's what surprised me most about this whole thing. For sure, doodling regularly helped me access more creativity as I became more comfortable sitting down, trusting myself, and having fun. But the big insight was that it made me more aware of things like this, like what urgency feels like, what my patterns are, and this big one, aware of how quickly I leave the present moment. And that reminds me of Snagglepuss and exit stage left. But seriously, That awareness, it changed my experience. It somehow changed my experience of life. It's big. It's like a big thing that changed. And I wouldn't say that it's like, I wouldn't use the word dramatic, but it is for sure a steady and consistent change. It's kind of like you can't unsee it once you see it and feel it personally. And I really mean that. And in midlife, steady presence is everything. Okay, that's it for this episode. And on that note, I want to make sure that you know how I can help you also have this kind of important, fun shift in your life. If you're curious about having your own sneak attack on autopilot, check out the Midlife Doodle Think Club. It is a mindful doodling practice where you simply notice your mind in real time while you're having fun doodling. No art skills required. Details are at www.doodlethink.com. Also, as I mentioned earlier, if you know that you're sleepwalking through the privilege of aging and that's not your style, I think you're ready to identify where you may be running on default instead of decision. More autopilot. How great is that? Go ahead and book your autopilot audit at www.talktosusie.com. As a master certified life coach and life leadership mentor, I offer coaching that is uniquely relevant to women our age in their 50s and 60s. And I have been working with women like you privately and with group coaching now for over 10 years. Moving forward like this is life-changing. So if you're curious about what this could mean for you, trust your gut and please reach out. Thanks so much for listening to the Women in the Middle show. Please remember to share it with your friends and other midlife gals you know would get a lot out of it. Being the queen of your brain domain is the best way to be, and it's the goal. It's time to stop waiting for the right moment and start creating the happiness, excitement, joy, and fulfillment that you crave. For show notes and links, go to www.susierosenstein.com and click on the podcast tab and look for episode 449. And you'll also see a link there for my other show, The Women in the Middle Entrepreneurs, which is all about the reality of running your business when you're a midlife gal. It's also on iTunes, Spotify, and all the podcast places. Let's do this, ladies. It's time for you to put yourself first, one thought at a time. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next week.